My name is Chloe, and I'm 38 years old. I once believed family meant standing together, no matter what. Now I haven't heard my son Jackson's voice in 8 months. The day he walked away, he said I chose his Uncle Thomas over him. He was right. I pressured him to forgive the man who betrayed his trust, all in the name of family unity. I feel the weight of that mistake every single day. If you're watching this, please like and subscribe, and let me know where you're viewing from. Family can be both our greatest comfort and our deepest wound, as I learned in the most painful way possible. I grew up in a small suburban neighborhood in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where our family was known for our Sunday barbecues and holiday gatherings. My parents created a childhood where family ties were considered sacred above all else. My father would often say, "Blood runs thicker than water, Chloe. Never forget that." This philosophy was drilled into me and my siblings from our earliest memories. When I was 9, my cousin ruined my science project the night before it was due. Despite my tears, my mother sat me down and said, "Family always forgives family. That's what makes us strong." I spent the night recreating my project, nursing both my anger and a growing belief that protecting family harmony was my responsibility. At 12, my aunt borrowed money from my savings for college without asking. When I complained, my father gave me a stern lecture about family loyalty. "Sometimes we make sacrifices for the people we love," he explained. By 16, I had learned to swallow my hurt feelings whenever a family member crossed my boundaries. The pattern was clear: individual pain was less important than family unity. I carried these values into adulthood, wearing them like a badge of honor. When I met William during my sophomore year at Michigan State University, his similar background immediately drew me to him. He came from a family where holidays were sacred and relatives were expected to show up no matter what conflicts existed. We bonded over stories of our childhoods and quickly realized we shared the same vision for our future family. After graduation, we married in a ceremony attended by over 100 relatives from both sides. My father's toast included the words, "You're not just marrying William Chloe, you're joining a new family, and that bond is unbreakable." I nodded proudly, already imagining the tight-knit family we would build together. Jackson was born 2 years later, and from the moment I held him, I promised to give him the same sense of family security I had grown up with. He was a sensitive child with thoughtful eyes that seemed to observe everything. 3 years later, our daughter Lily completed our family with her bubbly personality and independent spirit. Our home in the suburbs of Detroit became the gathering place for holidays and celebrations. I worked part-time as an elementary school teacher while William built his career as an engineer. We cultivated traditions, took annual family photos in matching outfits, and presented a picture of family perfection to our community. William's younger brother Thomas was a frequent visitor in our home. 5 years younger than William, Thomas had always been the family's free spirit. He had dropped out of college to pursue a career in photography and media production. His charm and charisma made him popular at family gatherings despite his tendency to borrow money. He never repaid and make promises he rarely kept. "He's family," William would say with a shrug whenever Thomas disappointed him. "We have to accept him as he is." I agreed wholeheartedly, seeing William's forgiveness of his brother as proof of his good character and family loyalty. As Jackson grew older, he developed an interest in photography and digital art. His quiet, creative nature made him vulnerable to criticism, but his talent was obvious even in his early teenage work. When Thomas noticed Jackson's interest aligned with his profession, he began paying special attention to my son, offering to show him techniques and give him advice. I was thrilled by this connection. "See how wonderful family is," I told Jackson. "You have an uncle in the exact field you love. That's not just coincidence. That's the blessing of family." What I didn't recognize then were the subtle signs of trouble. The way Thomas would occasionally dismiss Jackson's ideas in front of everyone. The competitive edge in his voice when he looked at Jackson's work. The times Jackson would withdraw after spending time with his uncle, claiming he was just tired. Family is forever. I would remind my children during our dinner conversations. Friends will come and go, but your family will always be there for you. Jackson would nod solemnly, absorbing the message I was so certain was true. Lily would sometimes question this wisdom, but I attributed her doubts to her youth. I never imagined that the family bonds I cherished so deeply would one day be the very thing that drove my son away from me. The warning signs were there, but my belief in family unity blinded me to what was happening right before my eyes. By the time Jackson turned 16, his relationship with his Uncle Thomas had evolved into what I believed was a meaningful mentorship. Thomas began visiting our home more frequently, specifically to work with Jackson on photography projects. I would find them in the basement huddled over a computer screen or discussing lighting techniques. Jackson's eyes would light up when Thomas complimented his work, and I felt grateful for this special bond. Uncle Thomas says I have a good eye for composition, Jackson told me one evening after Thomas had left. He thinks I could actually make it in this field. The pride in his voice made my heart swell. This was exactly the kind of family connection I had always wanted for my children. As Jackson's junior year of high school approached, Thomas began talking about helping him build a portfolio for college applications. The competition for good arts programs is fierce, Thomas explained during a family dinner. But I can help Jackson stand out. I know what the admissions people are looking for. Jackson spent entire weekends at Thomas's studio learning editing software and camera techniques. He would return home exhausted but excited, carrying memory cards full of images he was eager to sort through. William and I encouraged this relationship, seeing it as both a professional opportunity and a strengthening of family ties. Looking back, I can now identify the moments I should have questioned. Like when Jackson asked if he could show me some new photos and Thomas interrupted saying, "They're not ready yet. I need to help you polish them first." Or when Jackson mentioned that Thomas had asked him not to post certain images on social media until they had worked on them properly. There was an evening when Jackson came home earlier than expected from Thomas's studio. When I asked why, he shrugged and said Uncle Thomas had to meet someone about a project. Later that night, I overheard him telling Lily he used my concepts in the pitch meeting, said it would be good practice for me to see how my ideas might be developed professionally. At the time, I dismissed the slight frown on Jackson's face. After all, wasn't Thomas giving him valuable industry experience? Wasn't this exactly the advantage of having family in the field? When Jackson turned 17, Thomas offered him an internship at his media company during summer break. "It will look great on your college applications," Thomas said, "and you can help me with some projects I have lined up." I noticed Jackson's hesitation. "That sounds amazing," I said, answering before Jackson could. "What an opportunity, right?" Jackson nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess it would be good experience." That summer, Jackson spent 3 days a week at Thomas's studio. Sometimes he would come home energized, other times strangely quiet. When I asked about his work, his answers became increasingly vague. "Just helping Uncle Thomas with stuff," he would say before heading to his room. William expressed some concerns one night after Jackson had gone to bed. "Does he seem different to you?" he asked. "Less excited about the internship than when it started." "He's just tired," I assured him. "Creative work is draining, and Thomas can be demanding. But this is such a valuable opportunity for him." During a family barbecue in August, I overheard Thomas describing a project to my brother. "The client loved the concept," Thomas was saying. "It was this series of images juxtaposing urban decay with new growth. Very symbolic." Later, I heard Jackson tell Lily, "That was my idea. I showed him the test shots last month, but now it's suddenly his concept." When Lily responded with outrage, Jackson quickly backpedaled. "No, it's fine. He's the professional. He probably just forgot where the idea came from. And anyway, he's giving me experience I couldn't get anywhere else." I should have recognized the hurt in his voice, the way he was trying to convince himself as much as Lily. Instead, I interrupted their conversation to call them for dinner, silently pleased that Jackson was being so mature about working with his uncle. As Jackson's senior year began, I noticed he was spending less time on photography at home. When I asked if everything was okay with his portfolio, he would shrug and say he was working on it with Thomas. He says colleges want to see a cohesive vision. He's helping me narrow down my style. I interpreted Jackson's increasing withdrawal as teenage angst combined with the pressure of college applications. When William suggested that perhaps Thomas was being too critical of Jackson's work, I defended his brother. Thomas is a professional. He knows what he's talking about. Jackson needs to develop a thick skin if he wants to make it in a creative field. What I didn't see was how Thomas had begun subtly taking credit for Jackson's ideas and work. At family gatherings, he would show Jackson's photographs to relatives with comments like, "This was from a concept I developed with Jackson. I'm really mentoring him on how to execute my vision." Jackson would stand silently nearby, his expression carefully neutral. I mistook his silence for agreement, not recognizing the quiet erosion of his confidence and artistic voice. The bond I thought was strengthening between them was actually becoming something toxic, and my focus on maintaining family harmony prevented me from seeing the truth. The first undeniable sign that something was seriously wrong came during the winter of Jackson's senior year. His grades began slipping in his usually strong subjects. He stopped bringing his camera to family events, claiming he wasn't in the mood to take photos. When applications for art programs came due, he seemed strangely apathetic. "I thought photography was your passion," I said one evening, watching him listlessly scrolling through college websites. "I guess," he replied without looking up. One night in January, I passed by his bedroom and heard muffled sounds. When I knocked and entered, I found Jackson quickly wiping his eyes. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I sat on the edge of his bed, concerned by the redness around his eyes. "Nothing. Just stressed about college stuff." He turned away, shutting down the conversation. When I pressed, he shook his head. "I'm just tired, Mom. I need some space." This became his standard response whenever I tried to talk to him. I discussed my concerns with William, who suggested giving Jackson room to work through whatever was bothering him. "Boys at this age need to process things in their own way," he reasoned. But the situation continued to deteriorate. Jackson stopped visiting Thomas's studio entirely. When I suggested he call his uncle about continuing work on his portfolio, he snapped, "I don't want to talk about that anymore," and left the room. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One afternoon, Lily knocked on my bedroom door. At 14, she had always been Jackson's confidant, the person he trusted most after a lifetime of shared secrets. "Mom, we need to talk about Uncle Thomas." Her voice was serious, her young face set with determination. "What about him?" I asked, putting aside the laundry I was folding. "He's been stealing Jackson's work." She said it plainly without dramatics. I laughed instinctively. "That's a serious accusation, Lily. I'm sure there's a misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding. Jackson showed me everything." Her eyes flashed with anger. "Uncle Thomas took Jackson's entire portfolio and presented it as his own work to win a contract with some big advertising agency." My stomach dropped. "That can't be right. Thomas would never do that to Jackson." "Jackson has proof," Lily insisted. "He found out when one of Thomas's assistants messaged him congratulating him on the concepts that got them the Westfield account. Jackson had no idea what they were talking about, because Thomas never told him he was using his work." I sat down slowly, trying to process this information. If this is true, why hasn't Jackson said anything? "Because of you." Lily's voice rose with emotion. "Because you're always talking about how family sticks together, no matter what. Because he's afraid you'll take Uncle Thomas's side." That night, Jackson finally opened up. With Lily's encouragement, he showed me his original files with creation dates and timestamps. He showed me social media posts where Thomas had subtly begun introducing Jackson's aesthetic as his own new direction months earlier. He showed me emails where Thomas had submitted Jackson's work to clients without attribution. "He told me I wasn't ready," Jackson said, his voice hollow. "He said my work needed his professional touch before it could be shown. But all along he was just taking it." The most devastating revelation was how Thomas had been systematically undermining Jackson's confidence. He would praise me in front of you guys, but when we were alone, he would pick apart everything I did. Tell me I didn't have what it takes, that I should be grateful for his help, because my work wasn't good enough on its own. Jackson had trusted his uncle, believing that the criticism was meant to help him improve. Instead, it was a calculated effort to keep him insecure while Thomas exploited his talent. And then last month, I found out he used my entire concept series for the Westfield pitch, the one I spent all last summer developing. He didn't change anything except put his name on it. The Westfield campaign was significant. It was for a major regional development project that would have garnered considerable attention. Thomas had mentioned landing a big client, but had never specified which one or what the project entailed. "He won the contract," Jackson continued. $50,000 for my ideas, my compositions, my vision. And he never intended to tell me. I felt sick as Jackson showed me side-by-side comparisons of his original work and the materials Thomas had presented to Westfield. There was no question about it. Thomas had stolen Jackson's work wholesale. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" I asked, still reeling from the evidence before me. Jackson's laugh was bitter. "Because every time I tried to hint that something was wrong, you told me how lucky I was to have Uncle Thomas in my life. How family always supports family." The worst part was learning that this betrayal had cost Jackson more than just credit for his work. A teacher had submitted one of his pieces to a young artist competition months earlier, not knowing it closely resembled work Thomas had already published professionally. Jackson was disqualified and accused of plagiarizing his uncle when in reality the opposite had occurred. "I was going to use that competition as part of my application to RISD," Jackson said, referring to the prestigious Rhode Island School of Design. "Now I have an official plagiarism complaint against me. My teacher had to fight to keep me from being suspended." As I listened to the full extent of Thomas's betrayal, I watched my son's passion slipping away. "I don't even want to pick up a camera anymore," he admitted. "Every time I think about photography, I just hear his voice telling me I'm not good enough." That night, Jackson asked for our support. "I need to confront him," he said. "I need him to admit what he did, and I need you and Dad to back me up." I agreed, still in shock, not yet recognizing how my deepest values were about to be tested. I promised Jackson we would address this as a family, not understanding that my definition of family was about to tear us apart. The next morning, I sat in our kitchen, staring at the evidence Jackson had shown me. Part of me wanted to believe there was some explanation, some misunderstanding, that could preserve the family harmony I valued so deeply. I called William at work, my voice shaking as I relayed what Jackson had told me. "I always had a feeling something wasn't right," William said, anger evident in his voice. "We need to confront Thomas immediately." But I hesitated. "Shouldn't we try to understand his side first? Maybe there's an explanation." "What possible explanation could there be for stealing our son's work?" William countered. "I just think we should handle this carefully. This could tear the family apart." There was a pause on the line. "Chloe, our son is hurting. That needs to come first." After hanging up, I made a decision that would haunt me. Instead of waiting for William to come home, I called Thomas directly. I told myself I was trying to understand the full picture, but in truth, I was already looking for a way to minimize the conflict. "Chloe, this is ridiculous," Thomas said after I carefully outlined Jackson's accusations. "Jackson misunderstood our arrangement completely. I've been mentoring him, teaching him the business. Of course, I used some of his ideas. That's how the industry works. It was never meant to be a secret. His voice was calm, reasonable. Jackson is young and doesn't understand professional collaboration. I've actually been doing him a favor by introducing his aesthetic into my professional work. It's giving him exposure he wouldn't otherwise have. When I mentioned the Westfield campaign specifically, Thomas sighed, as if dealing with a naive child. That project evolved from concepts we developed together. Yes, Jackson contributed some initial ideas, but the final execution was all my professional expertise. Does he think clients pay for raw amateur concepts? Thomas then shifted tactics, his voice dropping with concern. To be honest, Chloe, I'm worried about him. He's been increasingly possessive and uncooperative. I think the pressure of college applications is getting to him. He's looking for someone to blame for his own insecurities. By the time we ended the call, Thomas had painted himself as the concerned uncle dealing with an ungrateful, immature nephew. And I, desperate to believe this family rift could be repaired, had begun to doubt my own son. When William came home, I shared Thomas's perspective, presenting it as a possible misunderstanding, rather than the deliberate betrayal Jackson had described. "Are you seriously defending him?" William asked incredulously. "After everything Jackson showed us." "I'm not defending anyone," I insisted. "I'm just saying there are two sides to every story. We need to handle this carefully." The family meeting that evening was disastrous. Jackson presented his evidence again, his voice gaining strength as he detailed Thomas's betrayal. But when he finished, I didn't offer the unequivocal support he needed. "Jackson, I understand you're upset," I began cautiously. "But I spoke with Uncle Thomas today, and I think there might be some misinterpretation about how the professional world works." Jackson's face fell. "Misinterpretation, Mom. He stole my work. He took credit for it. He lied to me for months. He says it was a collaborative process," I continued. "That mentorship often involves developing ideas together." "Collaborative?" Jackson's voice cracked. "He told me my work wasn't good enough to show anyone. Then he showed it to everyone with his name on it." William stepped in his support for Jackson clear. "Thomas crossed a line. There's no excuse for what he did." But I couldn't let go of my need for family harmony. "I think we all need to sit down together and clear the air. I'm sure Thomas never intended to hurt you, Jackson." "Never intended?" Jackson stood up trembling. "He systematically stole my work while destroying my confidence. That was the entire plan." "I think you might be exaggerating a little," I said, the words falling from my mouth before I could stop them. "Thomas has always been there for you. Family doesn't always get everything right, but we forgive each other." The look of betrayal on Jackson's face is something I'll never forget. "So that's it. He steals my work, ruins my reputation, and I'm supposed to just forgive him because he's family." "I'm just saying that holding grudges only hurts you in the long run," I argued. "Blood is thicker than water, Jackson. Family is all we have in the end." "Even when family is the one hurting you," Jackson's voice was quiet now. "Even when family is the one stealing from you." The conversation deteriorated from there. I insisted that Jackson needed to consider the bigger picture, that maintaining family unity was more important than any single incident, no matter how painful. "I expect you to be at Grandma's birthday next week," I finally said. "Thomas will be there, and I need you to be civil. You don't have to talk to him, but I won't have the family divided." Jackson stared at me in disbelief. "You're forcing me to sit across the table from someone who stole my work and lied to my face to pretend everything is fine for Grandma's sake." "Sometimes we make sacrifices for the people we love," I said, echoing my father's words from so long ago. "And what about me?" Jackson asked, his voice breaking. "Who's sacrificing for me?" That night, the divide in our family deepened. William argued with me after the kids went to bed, saying I was making a terrible mistake by prioritizing appearances over Jackson's legitimate pain. Thomas is the one who should be excluded from family gatherings, he insisted, not made comfortable while our son suffers. But I was stubborn. If we start banning people from family events, where does it end? Family needs to stick together through disagreements. This isn't a disagreement, Chloe. This is a betrayal. And you're asking our son to swallow his pain to make everyone else comfortable. I went to sleep that night, convinced I was protecting our family's foundation, not realizing I was actually destroying it piece by piece. The weeks following our confrontation were filled with a tension that seemed to vibrate through our home. Jackson withdrew, further spending most of his time in his room. When forced to be in common areas, he was polite, but distant, answering questions with minimal words and avoiding eye contact with me. Grandma's birthday arrived, and Jackson attended as instructed. He sat at the far end of the table, speaking only when directly addressed. Thomas, by contrast, was his usual charming self, working the room and playing the role of devoted nephew and uncle. At one point, Thomas approached Jackson, clapping him on the shoulder. "How's the college search going? Champ found any good photography programs?" The room didn't notice how Jackson stiffened at the touch or how his knuckles turned white around his fork. Only Lily, sitting beside him, saw and quickly created a diversion by asking Thomas about his latest projects. I watched this interaction from across the table, telling myself that this awkwardness would pass, that eventually Jackson would forgive his uncle and our family would heal, that this approach was best for everyone in the long run. But even as I clung to this belief, evidence continued to mount against Thomas. A week after the birthday party, one of Jackson's former teachers called to tell him that a photography blog had featured Thomas's work, including images strikingly similar to projects Jackson had completed in her class. Jackson brought this new information to William, deliberately excluding me from the conversation. I overheard them in William's home office, the door slightly ajar. "He's still doing it, Dad. He's still using my work. It's like he knows he can get away with it." William's response was measured but supportive. "We'll figure this out, Jackson. This isn't right, and it needs to stop." Later that night, William confronted me. "Thomas is continuing to profit from Jackson's work. How can you still expect our son to just forgive and forget?" I felt cornered. "What do you want me to do? Cut Thomas out of our lives completely? He's your brother. He's family." "So is Jackson?" William rarely raised his voice, but he did now. "Our son is family too. Why does Thomas's status as family trump Jackson's right to be protected by his parents?" This question hit me hard, but I still couldn't let go of my deeply ingrained beliefs about family unity. "I'm trying to protect everyone," I insisted, including Jackson. Carrying anger and resentment only hurts him in the long run. As April arrived, Jackson received his college acceptance letters. Despite everything, his portfolio, the portions that remained clearly his work, had impressed several programs. He decided on a school in California as far from home as he could manage, while still attending a reputable program. I told myself his choice was about the quality of the school, not about escaping our family dynamic. But deep down, I knew better. The situation came to a breaking point at what should have been a celebration dinner for Jackson's college acceptance. We had invited immediate family, including Thomas, to a restaurant to mark the occasion. I had convinced myself that this show of family support was what Jackson needed to move forward. Thomas arrived late, making a grand entrance and immediately commanding attention. During the meal, he stood to make a toast, raising his glass to Jackson. "To my nephew, who has a bright future ahead of him. I've watched him develop his eye over the past few years, and I can say with pride that my mentorship has helped shape him into the artist he's becoming. Some of my best recent work has been inspired by our collaboration." I watched Jackson's face drain of color. Beside him, Lily grabbed his hand under the table, squeezing it in silent support. William's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, I rose to add to the toast. "Yes, we're so grateful for all your guidance, Thomas. Jackson has been so lucky to have you showing him the ropes of the industry." The words left my mouth automatically part of the script I had written in my head about our perfect supportive family. I didn't register the look of absolute betrayal on Jackson's face until it was too late. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The restaurant fell silent as all eyes turned to him. "Lucky." His voice was low, but intense. "You think I was lucky to have my work stolen, to have my confidence systematically destroyed, to be manipulated and lied to?" Thomas's charming facade faltered. "Jackson, I think you're mischaracterizing our professional relationship." "Professional?" Jackson laughed bitterly. "There was nothing professional about what you did. You're a thief. You stole my work, my ideas, my future. And now you're standing here taking credit for my college acceptance." He turned to me, his eyes filled with pain. "And you're supposed to be my mother. You're supposed to protect me. Instead, you force me to sit here and listen to him lie about me, about us. You expect me to forgive him with no consequences, no acknowledgement, nothing." "Jackson, please," I pleaded, aware of the scene we were creating. "This isn't the time or place." "When is the time? When is the place? You've made it clear that my feelings don't matter, as long as the family looks unified on the surface." He turned back to the table at large. "I'm done pretending. I'm done with this toxic idea that family means allowing yourself to be abused. I'm done with all of it." With that, he walked out of the restaurant. Lily immediately stood to follow him, pausing only to say, "He's right, Mom. What you're doing is wrong." The dinner disintegrated after that. William and Thomas argued openly, with Thomas finally showing his true colors as he threatened to cut William out of their parents' will if he didn't control his son. When we returned home, Jackson was packing a bag. "What are you doing?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "I'm staying with Dad's friend Mark until graduation. He already said it's fine." "You can't just leave," I protested. "We need to talk about this as a family." "Family." Jackson stopped packing to face me. "You keep using that word, but you don't know what it means. Family doesn't ask someone to silence their pain, to make their abuser comfortable. Family doesn't tell someone to forgive without accountability. Family protects each other." "I'm trying to protect everyone," I insisted. "No, you're protecting your idea of what family should look like. The perfect holiday dinners, the group photos where everyone's smiling. But it's all fake, Mom, and I won't be part of it anymore." Those were the last words my son spoke to me in person. He left that night, and true to his word, he stayed with Mark's family until graduation. He attended the ceremony, but left immediately after, not even stopping to take photos with us. 2 days later, he flew to California for a summer program before his freshman year began. For 8 months, I've lived with the consequences of choosing family appearance over my son's well-being. For 8 months, I've wondered if my peace cost his healing. The days after Jackson left were a blur of denial and self-justification. I told myself he was overreacting, that he would calm down and see the importance of family unity. I expected a phone call or text within days apologizing for his outburst at the restaurant. It never came. Instead, the silence from Jackson was deafening. He communicated with William and Lily, but my messages went unanswered. When I called, it went straight to voicemail. After a week, I stopped trying, telling myself I was giving him space, but really nursing my own hurt pride. The family fractured in ways I never anticipated. Lily, usually my cheerful shadow, became cold and distant. "Jackson sends his love," she would tell William within my earshot, pointedly excluding me from the message. William was caught in the middle, but made his position clear. "I love you, Chloe, but you made the wrong choice. Our son needed your support, and you chose your idealized version of family instead." 2 weeks after Jackson left, I was cleaning his room when I found a hidden folder on his computer. It contained extensive documentation of Thomas's theft. Timestamps, original files, emails, and even recorded conversations where Thomas subtly undermined Jackson while taking credit for his ideas. The evidence was overwhelming and left no room for misunderstanding. I finally confronted Thomas directly, meeting him for coffee with printouts of what I had found. "You need to make this right," I told him. "You need to publicly acknowledge what you did and apologize to Jackson." Thomas's charm disappeared instantly. "Are you threatening me?" His voice was cold. "Because I don't respond well to threats, Chloe, even from family. Especially from family. This isn't a threat. It's about doing the right thing." "The right thing?" Thomas laughed. "You mean like how you did the right thing by taking my side over your son's? You chose family unity, remember? You can't have it both ways." When I insisted, he leaned forward, his expression hardening. "Let me be clear. If you push this, I will make sure everyone in the family knows it was your idea to minimize what happened. That you were the one who told Jackson he was exaggerating. That you prioritized your perfect family image over your son's career." I realized then that Thomas had been manipulating me just as he had manipulated Jackson. He had played on my deep-seated values, knowing I would choose family harmony over conflict, even at my son's expense. That evening, I told William everything Thomas had said. Instead of the anger I expected, William looked at me with something like pity. "Did you really think he was any different with you than he was with Jackson? Thomas has always used people. The only difference is that Jackson was brave enough to stand up to him." The next day, William called Thomas to tell him he was no longer welcome in our home. "You stole from my son," he said simply. "There's no coming back from that." The family divisions deepened. William's parents, after initially defending Thomas, saw the evidence and supported our decision to cut ties. My parents, however, continued to insist that family should work through these things. "But at what cost?" I finally asked my mother during a tense phone call. "At the cost of my relationship with my son. He'll come around," she assured me. "Family is forever." Those words, once my mantra, now rang hollow. Family hadn't been forever for Jackson. Family had betrayed him twice, first when his uncle stole his work, and again when his mother insisted he forgive without justice. 3 months after Jackson left, Lily sat me down for the most honest conversation we'd ever had. "You know what's ironic, Mom? You were so focused on keeping the family together that you tore it apart." Her words cut deep, but she wasn't finished. "Jackson talks to me about it sometimes. He says the worst part wasn't even Uncle Thomas stealing his work. It was you not believing him. You making him feel like his pain wasn't important." "I did believe him," I protested weakly. "I just thought forgiveness was the best path forward." "Forgiveness without accountability isn't forgiveness," Lily said, sounding far older than her 15 years. "It's just enabling bad behavior." As summer turned to fall, I watched my carefully constructed family image crumble. Extended family gatherings became awkward affairs, with people taking sides and speaking in hushed tones when I entered a room. The community that had once viewed us as the perfect family now whispered about Jackson's absence. I made multiple attempts to contact Jackson. I sent emails apologizing for not supporting him, for prioritizing family harmony over his well-being. Each one went unanswered. Through Lily, I learned that Jackson had started therapy. "He's working through a lot," she reported. "Not just about Uncle Thomas, but about the pressure he always felt to maintain the family image you created." This revelation shook me to my core. Had I been perpetuating the same toxic patterns from my childhood? Had my insistence on family unity, at all costs, created an environment where authenticity was sacrificed for appearance? I began to examine my own upbringing with new eyes. The times I was forced to forgive without receiving true apologies. The way individual pain was minimized for the sake of family gatherings. The message that loyalty meant silence in the face of wrongdoing. For the first time, I questioned the values I had built my life around. What if true family loyalty meant standing up for each other against harm, even when that harm came from within the family? What if prioritizing harmony over honesty actually weakened family bonds rather than strengthening them? 6 months after Jackson left, I started therapy myself. I needed to understand how I had failed my son so completely and how I could begin to make amends if that was even possible. You equated family unity with family health, my therapist observed during one session. But sometimes, the healthiest thing for a family is to acknowledge when boundaries have been violated and to hold people accountable. Slowly, painfully, I began to recognize the toxic patterns I had perpetuated. I saw how my insistence on forgiveness without accountability had taught Jackson that his boundaries didn't matter. I understood finally that in trying to preserve my idea of family, I had sacrificed my actual relationship with my son. 7 months after our estrangement began, I wrote Jackson a different kind of letter. This time, I didn't ask for forgiveness or reunion. I simply acknowledged the truth. I was wrong, I wrote. Not just about Thomas, but about what family means. True family protects each other from harm, even when that harm comes from someone within the family. I failed to protect you. I prioritized the appearance of family unity over your actual well-being. There's no excuse for that, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I finally understand what I did wrong, and I am so deeply sorry for the pain I caused you. A week later, I received a brief email in response. I need more time, was all it said. But it was the first direct communication from my son in over 7 months, and it gave me hope that perhaps someday healing might be possible. It's been 8 months since Jackson walked out of that restaurant, 8 months of painful reflection and growth. The journey to this point has been the hardest of my life, forcing me to question my deepest values and recognize the harm they caused when applied without nuance or compassion. My therapy sessions became a lifeline as I worked to understand how my childhood had shaped my rigid beliefs about family. I remembered countless incidents where I was expected to smile through mistreatment for the sake of keeping the peace. I recognized how I had internalized the message that individual pain was less important than collective harmony. Your parents taught you that love meant sacrifice, my therapist pointed out, but they didn't teach you the difference between healthy sacrifice and harmful self-erasure. This distinction became crucial to my understanding. There was a profound difference between occasionally compromising for family harmony and systematically ignoring abuse or betrayal. I had failed to see that difference, and Jackson had paid the price. The process of rebuilding my relationship with Lily and William was gradual but meaningful. Lily, initially cold and protective of her brother, began to soften as she saw my genuine efforts to change. Jackson says your last email was different, she told me one evening while we were preparing dinner. He said it was the first time you didn't make it about you. Those words gave me hope, but I was careful not to pressure Jackson through his sister. I'm glad he felt that way, I said simply. He deserves a mother who puts his needs first. William and I had many difficult conversations about the values we wanted to model for our children moving forward. I enabled this too, he admitted. I knew something was wrong between Thomas and Jackson long before it came to a head. I should have intervened earlier. Together, we made the decision to completely cut ties with Thomas. It wasn't just about his betrayal of Jackson anymore. It was about recognizing that true family supports each other's growth and well-being, and Thomas had demonstrated repeatedly that he was incapable of that kind of relationship. The extended family fallout was significant. Some relatives took Thomas's side, unable to believe the charming brother-in-law they knew could be so manipulative. Others stood firmly with us, particularly after seeing the evidence Jackson had compiled. Family gatherings became smaller but more authentic. For the first time, I found myself prioritizing quality of relationship over appearance of harmony. 8 months after our estrangement began, I received a text message from Jackson. "I'm coming home for the weekend. Would like to talk." Those simple words sent my heart racing. I was terrified of saying the wrong thing, of somehow pushing him away again just when a sliver of connection was possible. I responded with equal simplicity. "We would love to see you. Whatever time works for you, works for us." The day of Jackson's arrival, I cleaned the house obsessively, then caught myself. "He's not coming to see a perfect home," I reminded myself. "He's coming to see if his mother has changed." Jackson arrived on a Friday afternoon. He looked different, more confident somehow, despite the caution in his eyes. We sat in the living room, the space between us filled with 8 months of silence. "I've been working through a lot in therapy," he began. "About Uncle Thomas, about our family dynamics, about myself." I nodded, giving him space to continue. "One thing I've realized is that I need boundaries to be respected. I can't be around people who dismiss my feelings or experiences, even if they're family, especially if they're family." "That's completely fair," I said, "and something I've been learning too." Jackson studied me for a moment. "I'm not ready to forgive you yet," he said finally. "But I am ready to start talking again, with conditions." He outlined his boundaries clearly. No pressure to reconnect with Thomas. No minimizing what happened. No expectations that he would simply move on without acknowledgement of the harm done. I agreed to all of them without hesitation. Our conversation that day was difficult but necessary. For the first time, I truly listened to Jackson's experience without trying to reframe it through my lens of family unity. He described the slow erosion of his confidence under Thomas's manipulation and how my response had felt like a second betrayal. "When you suggested I was exaggerating, it was like you were saying my reality didn't matter," he explained. "Like your image of our family was more important than what was actually happening to me." Those words broke my heart, but I needed to hear them. "You're right," I acknowledged. "I put my idea of what our family should be above what you are actually experiencing. I was wrong, and I'm deeply sorry." That weekend was the beginning of a careful, tentative rebuilding of trust. Jackson stayed for 2 days, spending time with Lily and having several long conversations with both William and me. Before he left, we agreed to regular video calls and another visit during his summer break. In the months since that first visit, our relationship has slowly begun to heal. Jackson has started picking up his camera again, reclaiming his passion for photography that Thomas nearly destroyed. He shared some of his new work with me, a sign of trust I don't take for granted. The most profound change has been in my understanding of what family truly means. It's not about maintaining appearances or forcing forgiveness without accountability. It's about creating a space where each person feels valued, respected, and protected. It's about standing up for each other, even when that means confronting other family members. It's about boundaries, honesty, and authentic connection. I've learned that true family loyalty means protecting each other from harm, not protecting harmful behavior for the sake of peace. I've learned that forgiveness without accountability isn't forgiveness at all, but rather a form of self-erasure that damages both the individual and the family as a whole. My relationship with Jackson is still healing. There are awkward moments and difficult conversations. There are times when old patterns try to reassert themselves, and I have to consciously choose a different path. But each step forward feels genuine in a way our previous perfect family never did. If you're watching this and recognizing yourself in my story, please consider whether you might be sacrificing authentic connection for the appearance of harmony. Are you prioritizing keeping the peace over addressing real harm? Are you asking someone to forgive without accountability? Are you confusing family loyalty with enabling toxic behavior? True support means standing beside someone when they're hurting, even when that's uncomfortable. True family loyalty means protecting each other from harm, no matter where that harm comes from. And true family unity comes from authentic relationships built on respect and honesty, not from forced forgiveness or silence in the face of wrongdoing. I nearly lost my son forever because I couldn't see these truths. I'm sharing this story in the hope that someone else might recognize these patterns before their family fractures the way mine did. What does true family loyalty mean to you? Has there been a time when you had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for what was right? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my journey from misguided loyalty to authentic family support.